Welcome to Wealth and Means, advice dressed up like hard work.
Thanks to our listeners in the U.S., Slovenia, Singapore, and Hong Kong. It's episode 35. Let's get into it.
This week's What You Didn't See in the News lines up 12 stories with the same hidden pattern: costs moving out of the background and into the price tag. A browser attack that doesn't need malware. Tomatoes up nearly 40% while headline inflation looks contained. And organ doctors mostly stopped measuring in adults that may predict whether you live or die. A quantum company raising $1.68 billion at a $14 billion valuation on $31 million of revenue, then closing almost exactly where it opened. Then in Wake Up Ready, we look at the week ahead. May CPI on Wednesday, PPI on Thursday, and Kevin Warsh's first FOMC meeting with a rumored plan to kill the dot plot and change how markets read the Fed. In Knowledge Bomb, we separate a great company from a great stock. Humor Me takes on the slow death of the day in day trading. The greater debate is Morgan Housel versus Michael Saylor, psychology versus physics, comfort versus conviction. And in Let's Invent Again, we meet the man who freed storytelling from the tyranny of sequence.
Every week, the infrastructure layer changes before the headline does. Pay attention to the layer.
Let's go.
Each week, we explore ideas that help you pause, reflect, and think more deeply about the opportunities all around you.
It's the perfect mix: a little information, a few stats, some real-world insights, and just enough deep talk to make you feel smarter before your second cup of coffee. A quick thank you to our sponsor, agentweekly.ai, chronicling the absurd, the ambitious, and the algorithmically challenged corners of the AI agent economy. Something changed about drones this week. Not a tech announcement, a transaction. Motorola Solutions is buying Defend Solutions for $1.5 billion. Defend makes counter-drone technology, including Enforce Air, a radio frequency system that doesn't destroy rogue drones. It takes control of them and redirects them safely. Motorola doesn't buy toys. It sells critical communications infrastructure to police departments, airports, stadiums, and emergency services. So this deal tells you what those customers are now asking for. Counter-drone tech used to be a defense budget story. Now, a $500 consumer drone can disrupt an airport, surveil a prison yard, or threaten a crowded event. That moves drone defense from the Pentagon into municipal procurement, local budgets, recurring contracts, installed base logic. The second order read: if Motorola believes its public safety customers will buy drone interception, the addressable market just expanded dramatically. This also surfaced alongside reports that Unusual Machines, a domestic drone parts manufacturer, saw unusual trading volume tied to Pentagon funding rumors. Same thesis: drone policy and drone defense are entering a new commercial phase together.
The $500 drone just became a $1.5 billion market problem.
That same underpriced asset theme shows up in tungsten. Nobody was watching tungsten. That's probably the point. Reports this week indicate Chinese buyers have been stockpiling U.S. tungsten scrap, recycled offcuts and machining waste from American manufacturers. Tungsten is used in ballistic penetrators, drill bits, cutting tools, and armor-piercing ammunition. It has an extremely high melting point and is hard to replace. The United States has almost no domestic primary tungsten mining. China controls roughly 80% of global supply. This is the lithium story, with less branding and more defense exposure. If China is buying American tungsten scrap, maybe it needs normal industrial input. Or maybe it is tightening supply ahead of export restrictions. Either way, defense manufacturers that rely on recycled tungsten are now watching a quiet supply chain risk become visible. The second order move: sleepy defense metals exposure can turn into a national security trade very quickly.
Scrap metal just became a national security question.
Speaking of strategic infrastructure, stablecoin regulation is turning into a payments arms race. In the UK, lawmakers are pressuring the Bank of England to loosen draft stablecoin rules. The bank's framework would require issuers to back tokens with central bank reserves, a standard private operators say is commercially impossible at scale. In the US, timelines around the Genius Act are tightening. The law creates the first real federal framework for dollar-backed stablecoins, who can issue them, under what conditions, and how private stablecoins sit next to monetary policy. Stablecoins are not just a crypto story anymore. They are payment rails. Think Visa in 1975. It looks like convenience, but the real question is who controls the network that moves the money. The US-UK gap matters because regulatory arbitrage is real. If Britain allows a lighter touch environment, dollar-denominated stablecoins can issue under British rules and undercut U.S. intent. The second-order question: if private stablecoins become dominant in cross-border payments, how does the Fed transmit policy through a system it doesn't fully control?
The fight over who controls digital dollars just got a legislative deadline.
Meanwhile, households are dealing with a much older payments problem: groceries. April CPI came in at 3.8%. That sounds manageable until you look inside the basket. USDA data from April shows beef and veal up 14.8% year over year, fresh vegetables up 11.5%, tomatoes up nearly 40%. The headline blends those shocks with categories that fell, like electronics, used cars, and some apparel. So a family buying meat and vegetables may be living through a food inflation rate that looks nothing like the number on TV. Three forces are compressing food prices: tariffs on imported food and inputs, higher energy and logistics costs, and a beef-specific cattle cycle problem after drought and reduced calving. None fixes quickly. When food inflation is category-specific and sustained, it changes behavior. Consumers move down the protein chain. Frozen and shelf-stable alternatives gain. Private label outperforms. The trade may not be at the grocery store. It may be in the companies consumers trade into when beef becomes a special occasion purchase.
3.8% is doing a lot of averaging for people eating a lot of beef.
From grocery baskets to media bundles, college sports is getting messy. A Duke-Michigan basketball game may be played in a baseball stadium. That sounds like a scheduling mistake. It is not. The issue is friction between the Big Ten's Fox deal and Amazon's growing college sports ambitions. Madison Square Garden was the planned venue for a premium late-season matchup, but rights conflicts could push the game somewhere larger and easier to distribute. This is what happens when new streaming money arrives before old TV contracts expire. College sports used to be simple. Conferences sold rights, ESPN, CBS, and Fox wrote checks, and fans watched on cable. Now Amazon has proven it can carry big live sports, and it wants more. But the Big Ten and SEC are still locked into legacy deals. So this is not really a sports story, it is a distribution story. Live sports is the last true appointment viewing content, which means conferences now have enormous leverage. The second-order question: if streamers win the next college sports rights cycle, do they change the economics of amateur athletics? And who ends up holding the remains of the cable bundle?
College sports found the same distribution problem as every other content category, just with mascots.
Now to one of the most strategically important public health stories that barely broke through U.S. financial media. Brazil made a vaccine no other country has. Developed by the Butantan Institute with the U.S. National Institutes of Health, Butantan DV is Brazil's domestically produced, single-dose dengue vaccine against all 4 dengue serotypes. Brazil has been rolling it out to healthcare workers since January 2026, with $70 million in initial campaign funding, and has signaled plans to supply Argentina, Peru, and Colombia. The phrase here is medical sovereignty. After COVID exposed how dependent developing nations were on foreign suppliers, countries began building domestic vaccine and drug capacity. Brazil with tropical disease vaccines, India with generics, Indonesia with biologics. The vaccine itself matters, because dengue burdens health systems across Latin America, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, and a single-dose version solves a major compliance problem. But the model may matter even more. Government-funded domestic development, foreign research partnership, and built-in regional export strategy. The second-order consequence: pharmaceutical supply chains that currently route through the U.S. and Western Europe now face competition from countries that are cheaper, capable, and politically motivated to own their own medical infrastructure.
Medical sovereignty is just supply chain resilience with a syringe attached.
And if Brazil changes how we think about biology as infrastructure, this next story changes how we think about what doctors stopped measuring. There's a small organ behind your breastbone that most adult medicine treats like an afterthought: the thymus. New research from Mass General Brigham suggests that may have been a mistake. 2 Nature studies used deep learning to measure thymic health from routine chest scans across large patient cohorts. The headline finding: people with high thymic health scores had about 50% lower overall mortality, 63% lower cardiovascular mortality, and 36% lower lung cancer risk versus people with low scores. Among cancer patients receiving immune checkpoint therapy, stronger thymic health was associated with a 44% lower risk of death. The striking part is that the thymus does not show up on standard blood panels. Doctors often assumed it became functionally irrelevant after childhood. But if thymic health remains measurable and predictive in adults, it becomes a new biomarker, and eventually a new target. That makes this a diagnostic story, a longevity story, and a biotech story. The second-order question is simple. If a standard CT scan already captures mortality predictive thymus data, why isn't that information routinely extracted?
The organ nobody was measuring may be predicting everything.
And
They're thinging shape.
same theme, biology revealing something we missed, but much stranger. A Texas biotech company hatched 26 live chicks from eggs it printed. Colossal Biosciences, best known for de-extinction efforts, announced that 26 chickens hatched from fully artificial eggshells. These are 3D printed honeycomb structures coated in a bioengineered silicone membrane that replicates a real shell's gas exchange. The team transfers the contents of fresh chicken eggs into the artificial shells before incubation. The chicks were healthy, normal chickens. Why does this matter? Colossal wants to incubate embryos of extinct bird species, like the dodo, where no living surrogate can handle the job. The artificial shell is a missing container in the de-extinction pipeline. Natural eggshells manage oxygen exchange through microscopic pore geometry. Replicating that requires precise lattice design and membrane chemistry. The immediate use case is de-extinction, but the secondary uses are agricultural and pharmaceutical, biosecure incubation systems that do not require hens, and eventually controlled developmental environments. The debate now is whether this is novel science or PR-polished extension of existing academic technique. That debate matters because it tells you how de-extinction companies manage the gap between announcement and publication.
The de-extinction pipeline now has a container.
There is a tension running under several stories this week between resources we need for the future and resources we might destroy to get them. Indonesia is the cleanest example. Raja Ampat in West Papua spans hundreds of islands and some of the most biodiverse coral reefs on Earth. Indonesia recently revoked 4 of 5 active nickel mining permits there after public pressure and viral reporting under the Save Raja Ampat banner. Indonesia is the world's largest supplier of nickel, a critical input for stainless steel and EV batteries. On Raja Ampat, some communities supported the mines for jobs. Others opposed them because mining threatened reefs that support fishing and tourism. The cruelty is obvious. Nickel helps power the green energy transition, but the ecological cost is paid by specific communities that did not design the energy system. The green transition is not uniformly green. We see the same pattern in lithium in South America and cobalt in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Revoking permits does not end the pressure. It pushes it elsewhere. Other islands, other deposits, deep-sea nodules, synthetic alternatives. Each carries its own environmental cost. The second-order consequence, battery supply chains may face a new category of constraint. Not just price, but moral and ecological legitimacy.
The coral reef is the externality nobody put in the battery price.
From environmental assets to financial assets, Quantinuum gave us a market signal. The quantum computing company raised $1.68 billion in its IPO. It priced at $60 above the expected range. It opened at 68, briefly touched 71, then closed at 60.38. Wall Street calls that a flat debut. It is actually a calibration. The implied valuation was roughly $14 to $15 billion. The company's 2025 revenue was about $31 million. That is roughly 450 times revenue. The science is real. Quantinuum is a full-stack quantum platform with credible technology, credible talent, and government support. But the valuation requires believing that a market that barely exists will become enormous on a timeline nobody can forecast. The flat close matters because institutions were willing to set a $14 billion entry point. They were not willing to chase it higher on day one. The second order read, investors will pay for frontier science, but only with limits. Science fiction at market price is acceptable. Science fiction at any price is not.
The market said yes to the vision and immediately argued with itself about the price.
Now to a security story that is genuinely strange. Researchers at Graz University of Technology published a paper showing that a website you visit can infer what other websites and applications you have open using timing signals from your computer's SSD. The technique is called frost, fingerprinting remotely using OPFS-based SSD timing. It exploits the browser's origin private file system, measuring tiny fluctuations in storage response caused by other programs competing for the same device. In lab tests, Frost identified open websites with roughly 89% accuracy and running applications with about 96% accuracy. No malware, no extension, no permission. You just visit a malicious page. This is a side channel attack. The twist is that previous SSD side channels needed software on the device. Frost moves the attack into the browser. The researchers say they have not seen it in the wild, but the gap between paper and exploit keeps shrinking. Why it matters. Cookie blocking, VPNs, and private browsing do not solve this. The signal is not in your cookies, it is in your drive timing. The second-order effect. Chrome, Safari, and Firefox now have to decide whether to restrict OPFS access, reducing the attack surface, but potentially breaking web features developers actually use.
The hard drive knows where you've been, and apparently it's willing to talk.
And the clearest example this week of invisible cost becoming visible came from GitHub Copilot. On June 1st, developers woke up to find that their flat AI coding subscription had become token-based billing. The reaction was immediate and ugly. GitHub's Copilot Pro Plus plan costs $39 a month and now includes a monthly budget of AI credits. Developers reported burning through credits fast, 8% in 2 hours, more than $6 for a single change request, and one estimate that a normal workflow could move from $29 a month to about $750. GitHub's forum filled with hundreds of comments and heavy downvotes. Developers started discussing alternatives: OpenRouter, local models, direct Anthropic, and OpenAI access. The irony is perfect. AI coding tools were sold as productivity amplification. Write more, faster, with less friction. Usage billing makes every extra prompt, iteration, and complex request a line item. That punishes the power users who found the most value. This is bigger than Copilot. It is a proxy battle for AI as a service pricing. Flat subscriptions feel like software. Token billing feels like utilities. Utilities are more honest about cost, but they make customers watch the meter. The second-order consequence. The more visible the token bill gets, the faster developers will route around it with local and open-source models. Now let's wake up ready. This is not a quiet week. Start Wednesday, June 10th. BLS releases May CPI at 8:30 Eastern. April was 3.8% year over year, up from 3.3% in March, with energy costs doing a lot of the damage. The key Wednesday is not just headline CPI, it is core. If core decelerates while energy drives the headline, the Fed has a cleaner narrative. If core accelerates, Kevin Warsh's opening week gets harder. The 10-year is already around 4.55%. A hot core print could push long rates higher, repricing mortgages, corporate debt, and housing affordability quickly.
Wednesday's number does not just land on a spreadsheet, it lands on Kevin Warsh's desk.
Then Thursday, June 11th, PPI. PPI tells you what producers are paying before those costs hit consumers. April showed pressure in food manufacturing and energy-intensive industries. If May stays hot, Wednesday's consumer inflation is not fading, it is being refilled upstream. Watch PPI services in particular. That is the sticky category and the one the Fed reads for wage-driven inflation. If services run hot, Warsh may not have a 2-meeting problem. He may have a 2-year problem.
The producer price print tells you where consumer pain is going, not just where it has been.
Then comes the Fed. Warsh's first FOMC meeting runs into the June 16th and 17th decision. Markets expect no rate change, with policy holding at 3.50 to 3.75%. So the rate is not the story, Warsh is. He was sworn in May 22nd and has described a reform-oriented Fed. Reporting suggests he may abolish the dot plot, the quarterly projection that shows where FOMC members expect rates to go. If the dot plot disappears, bond markets lose a major forward guidance tool. That makes every CPI, PPI, jobs report, and Warsh press conference more volatile. Also watch dissents. At the April meeting, before Warsh took over, 4 of 12 members dissented, the most divided FOMC since 1992. If dissents narrow, Warsh establishes early authority. If they hold or widen, the division is structural.
Warsh's first meeting could change not just the rate path, but the instrument markets use to read it.
Beyond the Fed, the geopolitical clock is ticking. The U.S.-Iran nuclear deal deadline is June 30th. The framework remains stuck on uranium enrichment, duration, and verification. The U.S. wants 20 years. Iran has offered 5. Polymarket odds of a completed deal by June 30th sit below 30%. Why markets care? Energy. Brent has stayed elevated through the Iran conflict, and energy feeds CPI. If talks collapse and conflict escalates, the second half inflation picture gets worse. If a deal lands, even partially, energy risk premium comes out. Watch Strait of Hormuz shipping data as the real-time proxy. Tanker traffic has been one of the best indicators of how much escalation risk the market should price.
The Iran deadline is doing quiet work inside every inflation report you'll see this month.
My personal watch this week is Quantinuum follow-through. The company debuted Thursday at a $14 billion valuation on $31 million of annual revenue, priced above range, and closed almost exactly at the IPO price. That is not rejection, it is calibration. If it holds above 60 in its first full trading week, the IPO window for frontier tech companies stays open. If it breaks below offering price, that is a warning to every high-multiple science company waiting on a roadshow shelf.
And that is how you wake up ready. Here's the knowledge bomb. Everybody knows the Wall Street warning. Don't catch a falling knife. A stock collapses. Investors decide it looks cheap. They rush in, it falls another 30%. The knife wins. But what happens when the danger is not below you? What happens when the danger is above you? Consider the eventual SpaceX IPO. This is not a falling knife. It is the opposite. It is a shooting star. A falling knife hurts because investors buy before the decline is over. A shooting star hurts because investors buy after most of the ascent is already complete. SpaceX launches rockets, lands rockets, deploys Starlink satellites, wins government contracts, and dominates headlines. For many investors, it is already legendary. That is the challenge. When a company becomes available to public investors, you are not buying the story. You are buying the price attached to the story. The danger is not fear, the danger is excitement. By the time retail investors get access, decades of engineering risk, execution risk, bankruptcy risk, launch failures, and uncertainty may already be reflected in the valuation. Founders, employees, venture funds, and private investors caught the rocket on the launch pad. Public investors may be trying to catch it while it streaks across the sky. That does not mean SpaceX would be a bad investment. It means investors need one rule. A great company is not automatically a great stock. The question is not whether SpaceX is extraordinary. The question is whether the future will be more extraordinary than the price already assumes. Wall Street warns you not to catch falling knives. The next warning may be simpler. Do not pay any price for a shooting star. And that's the knowledge bomb.
Humor me for a second. I am beginning to worry about day traders. Not because they are losing money. That problem solved itself years ago. I am worried because Wall Street appears determined to eliminate the day from day trading. For decades, the arrangement was simple. The market opened, the market closed. Humans experienced sunlight, meals, and sleep. Now we are heading toward markets open 23 hours a day. At some point, we have to stop calling these people day traders and start calling them what they are. Shift workers. Imagine explaining your career. So what do? I'm a day trader. Nice, what hours? Midnight to 6. Sir, that is not day trading. That is haunting. The old day trader was a guy in a Patagonia vest watching CNBC. The new day trader is eating leftover Chinese food at 2:17 a.m. while staring at candlestick charts lit only by the refrigerator he forgot to close. Even the language breaks. How was your trading day? Which one? The Tuesday day? The Tuesday night? The Wednesday pre-dawn session? The 4 a.m. liquidity event? The 5:30 a.m. emotional collapse? We will need time zones just to discuss losses. I was up 12% during Pacific morning hours, but got destroyed during Central European insomnia session. The closing bell used to be civilization. It was the financial equivalent of a bartender saying, "That's enough for tonight." Now Wall Street has decided, what if there was never enough for tonight? You know who benefits from a market that never sleeps? Algorithms. You know who does not? The carbon-based life form competing with them on a fourth energy drink at 3:42 in the morning. The algorithm does not need rest. The algorithm does not need a marriage. The algorithm does not wake up at 4 a.m. and wonder whether it should become a park ranger. Humans do. For years, retail investors were told long-term investing was boring. Buy good assets, hold them, let compounding work. Too simple. Instead, millions chose a profession that now requires monitoring stock prices around the clock, like they are guarding a medieval city. Any movement? Nothing yet. Stay vigilant. Sir, it is 3:15 a.m. The Japanese market sneezed everyone to battle stations. Eventually, the terminology will catch up. Perpetual trading, continuous trading, or the accurate term, financial insomnia. Because if you check futures at 2 a.m., crypto at 3, pre-market at 6, and earnings after dinner, you are not trading the market anymore. The market is trading you. And somewhere, a buy and hold investor just rolled over, checked his account once this month, and accidentally outperformed all of it. Which, as always, is the punchline.
There are debates that stop your scroll, and there are debates that clear the dinner table. It's time for the greater debate. Today's greater debate is a clean philosophical collision. On one side, money is psychology. The goal is not maximizing the number, it is maximizing control. Stay liquid, diversify, avoid bad debt, keep enough cash that a bad year does not turn you into a forced seller. On the other side, Michael Saylor, money is physics, capital is energy. Fiat leaks that energy by design. Diversification is often fear wearing a responsible outfit. If you identify the hardest monetary asset, selling pieces of it for weaker assets is not prudence. It is sabotage in a navy blazer. This is not really index funds versus Bitcoin. It is two definitions of wealth. For Housel, wealth is control over your time. For Saylor, wealth is control over your purchasing power. Both arguments are persuasive, just not for the same person at the same moment, with the same balance sheet, obligations, temperament, and sleep schedule. Round 1, diversification versus conviction. The Housel case begins with humility. Nobody knows what the next decade will reward. We can build elegant narratives about AI, Bitcoin, deficits, demographics, energy, robotics, sovereign debt, and productivity. But nobody knows. A diversified portfolio is not a failure of imagination. It is an admission of reality. It says, I do not know which company wins, which sector dominates, or which founder is building the next trillion-dollar machine in bad lighting with no HR department. So I will own the system. I will let capitalism sort it out. Cash fits this worldview too. On a spreadsheet, cash looks lazy. To Housel, cash is emotional infrastructure. Cash prevents forced stupidity. If 1 or 2 years of living expenses keeps you from selling in a crash, that cash may be one of your highest returning assets, not because it grows, because it keeps you from shrinking. Saylor hears that and basically says, that is loser math with a cardigan. His case is that diversification is often a polite word for not knowing what you believe. If you own the best asset, why trim it? Why water the weeds? For Saylor, the enemy is not volatility, it is debasement. Cash melts, bonds melt. Real estate gets taxed, insured, repaired, regulated, litigated, and occasionally invaded by raccoons with tenant rights. Bitcoin, in his worldview, is not a trade. It is scarce digital property, a closed-supply monetary network in a world where almost everything else can be issued, diluted, printed, refinanced, rehypothecated, or ruined by committee. This is where Saylor goes full financial thermodynamics. Money becomes energy. Bitcoin becomes a battery. Cash becomes an ice cube. Your bank account becomes a puddle with a debit card. So round 1 is simple. Housel says, do not concentrate so much that you break yourself emotionally. Saylor says, do not diversify so much that you guarantee mediocrity mathematically. One side fears ruin by panic. The other fears ruin by dilution. Round 2, what is risk? Housel says volatility is a fee, not a fine. Markets fall, assets crash. That is the cost of admission. The real question is not whether your portfolio will suffer. It will. The question is whether your life and temperament can survive the suffering without forcing you into a bad decision. A 50% drawdown is not just a number. It's a marital conversation. It is a bad night of sleep. It is checking your phone at 2:13 a.m. It is discovering that your bull market risk tolerance was just dopamine in a Patagonia vest. The best strategy is not the one with the highest theoretical return. It's the one you can actually stick with. The math does not matter if your nervous system refuses to execute it. Saylor says this definition of risk is too soft. Volatility is not risk. Volatility is information. The real risk is permanent loss of purchasing power. A dollar that quietly loses value every year feels safe because it does not jump around on a chart, but that is slow violence. Financial carbon monoxide. People confuse stability of price with stability of value. Bitcoin drops 50% and everyone screams. Cash loses purchasing power year after year and everyone calls it prudent. So the question becomes, which pain can you survive? Visible volatility or invisible decay? There is no painless option, only the pain you understand and the pain you underestimate. Round 3, debt, leverage, and freedom. Saylor sees intelligent leverage as a tool. If you can borrow long-term at a fixed rate in a currency being debased and buy a harder asset, that is not recklessness. It is capital strategy. Bad debt buys consumption. Good debt buys scarce productive or monetary assets. In Saylor shorthand, borrow the ice cube, buy the granite. Housel responds, leverage does not just change your return, it changes your relationship with time. Without leverage, you can be right eventually. With leverage, you must be right on schedule. Debt introduces a clock. Debt does not care if you are tired, early, unlucky, or right for the wrong decade. Debt sits there with a calendar and a lawyer. That is the Housel warning. Saylor says leverage can accelerate escape from fiat debasement. Housel says leverage can quietly put your freedom in escrow. Both are right under different assumptions. If your cash flows are durable, your debt is long-term, your conviction is real, and your stomach is industrial grade, leverage may be rational. If your income is fragile, your obligations are personal, and your conviction was mostly assembled from podcasts, leverage is not strategy. It is cosplay. The deeper divide is optimization. Housel optimizes for endurance. Saylor optimizes for maximum monetary truth. Housel's nightmare is the investor with a brilliant plan who cannot stick with it. Saylor's nightmare is the investor who sticks with a comfortable plan while the monetary system drains it. Housel says the best portfolio lets you sleep. Saylor says sleep is expensive if your bed is denominated in melting money. Some people need more conviction. They are over-diversified, over-cautious, and hiding from opportunity under a blanket called prudence. Other people need more humility. They are over-concentrated, over-leveraged, and mistaking a bull market for a personality test they passed. The mistake is importing someone else's optimal strategy without importing their balance sheet, temperament, time horizon, income, obligations, and emotional wiring. Michael Saylor can tolerate volatility that would make a normal household physically ill. Morgan Housel is describing how real people behave when money, fear, ego, family, and uncertainty enter the same room. So here is the wealth and means verdict. If you are young, high income, low obligation, technically literate, temperamentally durable, and genuinely convinced Bitcoin is the superior monetary network, the Saylor argument is not crazy. Concentration is how fortunes are made. Dilution is how conviction dies. But if you have a family, mortgage, variable income, aging parents, college costs, a business to run, or a tendency to check your portfolio like it owes you an apology, the Housel argument may save you from yourself. Money is not just math. It is also not just feelings. That is the trap on both sides. The psychology-only investor can get too comfortable with underperformance. The first principles investor can get too dismissive of human fragility. The market does not care whether your weakness is intellectual or emotional. It will find either one. So know thyself and know the denominator. Know what you own. Know why you own it. Know what would make you sell. Know what drawdown would break you. Know how much cash buys peace. Know whether debt is a tool in your hands or a leash around your neck. The Housel investor asks, will this let me stay in the game? The Saylor investor asks, is this the best game to be in? The wealthy answer may require both questions, because over the next decade, the winners may not be maximally diversified or maximally concentrated. They may be the people who understood the difference between a portfolio they admired and a portfolio they could survive. And that is the greater debate.
Let's invent again. Before machines ran everything, a story had a sequence. You shot it in order, or you were stuck with it in order. In 1987, a young MIT engineer named Bill Warner decided that was not a law of nature. It was a technical limitation. Film editing had long involved cutting and splicing celluloid, manual, physical, intuitive. But video editing in the late 1980s was linear. You worked from beginning to end. If you changed something in the middle, everything after it might need to be rebuilt. A 2-hour program with a problem in Reel 3 meant Reels 3, 4, and 5 were all suddenly in play. Warner saw the bottleneck was not creativity, it was architecture. The system demanded obedience to time that had nothing to do with the story. So he built a different system. He founded Avid Technology in 1987 and shipped Avid Media Composer, a digital nonlinear editor that let editors work anywhere in a program, instantly, at any time. Cut the end, revise the beginning, rearrange the middle without disturbing what was already locked. It ran at 30 frames per second and introduced an on-screen timeline interface that became the template for nearly every editing system that followed. The consequence came in 2 waves. First, speed. Editors compressed days of work into hours. The creative loop tightened, more ideas got tried. Second, democratization. Tools that once required a broadcast facility moved into a room, then onto a desk, then onto a laptop. The systems that shaped major films eventually reached students, documentarians, and bedroom creators with stories to tell. By 2018, Avid's solutions were used in 70% of commercially published music, 90% of original content from leading streaming providers, and 9 of 10 major international news networks. The company went public in 1993. Warner later created Wildfire Communications, a voice-activated virtual assistant, years before Siri. But the important idea is simpler. The Avid was not just a faster way to edit. It freed the timeline, and that connects to everything today. Because this week, we kept finding systems where the hidden architecture mattered more than the visible story. Drone defense, digital dollars, food prices, browser privacy, AI billing, and even the Fed's communication tools. Sometimes the breakthrough is not a new story. It is the moment someone realizes the old sequence was optional. That's it for another episode of Wealth and Means, advice dressed up like hard work.
We hope you enjoyed the arc. From cattle prices to coral reefs, from a forgotten organ to a flat IPO debut, and from the philosophy of cash to the invention that freed every story from its original sequence. The pattern was simple: cost, clarity, conviction. Because first principles are rarely flashy.
Subscribe, rate, and share this episode. It helps more than you think.
We do this for you, to help you have a better week, a sharper mind, and maybe even a longer attention span.
And a special thanks to our sponsor, agentweekly.ai.
Till next time, stay curious.
Stay kind.
And keep compounding.